Friends, gather round, for we have ourselves a trade deal. That's right, former President Donald J. Trump, a man who once referred to himself as a very stable genius, has apparently brokered a trade deal between the United States and the United Kingdom. And he did it in the most fitting way possible, by announcing it on Truth Social, the social media platform he founded after getting kicked off of literally every other platform. It's like finding out about a peace treaty negotiated entirely through gas station bathroom graffiti. Now this isn't just any trade deal. Oh no, this is a full and comprehensive trade deal, according to Trump himself. Those are his words, not mine. Though to be fair, full and comprehensive could mean anything when it comes to Trump. It could be a 1,000-page document meticulously outlining every last detail. Or it could be a napkin doodle he made while watching Fox and Friends and eating a bucket of KFC. We're still waiting on the official details, but for now, we're left to decipher the ramblings of a man who once suggested injecting bleach to cure COVID-19. So buckle up, because this is going to be a bumpy ride. What does this deal actually mean for the US and the UK? What are the potential benefits? And what about the potential downsides? These are all questions we'll be exploring in this essay, so stick around. Because if there's one thing we know about trade deals, it's that they're rarely as simple as they seem. And when Donald Trump is involved, well, let's just say things tend to get a whole lot more interesting. Okay, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of this full and comprehensive trade deal, shall we? From what we can gather, the deal covers a wide range of sectors, including the usual suspects: agriculture, technology, and financial services. Basically, if it can be grown, coded, or used to move money around, it's probably in there somewhere. The big promise here is tariff elimination. We're talking about potentially getting rid of tariffs on up to 98% of goods traded between the US and the UK. Now that sounds great on paper. Who doesn't love the idea of cheaper stuff, right? But the devil, as always, is in the details. We need to know which specific goods are getting those sweet, sweet tariff cuts. Is it going to be American cars? British cheese? Or are we talking about obscure industrial components that most people have never even heard of? And let's not forget, eliminating tariffs can be a double-edged sword. Sure, it can make things cheaper for consumers, but it can also put domestic industries at risk if they can't compete with cheaper imports. So, while the prospect of a 98% tariff-free zone sounds enticing, we need to see the fine print before we start popping champagne corks. Now, let's talk about the stuff that's buried deep in the fine print of this trade deal. The stuff that doesn't make it into the headlines but could have a huge impact on our lives: digital trade and intellectual property rights. The deal reportedly includes provisions for digital trade, which could mean a whole lot of things. It could mean easier data sharing between US and UK companies, which sounds great for innovation but could also raise concerns about privacy and data security. Imagine a world where Facebook can share your data with even more companies, all in the name of free trade. Suddenly, that targeted advertising for adult diapers doesn't seem so bad, does it? And then there's intellectual property rights, which are always a contentious issue in trade deals. The US is notoriously protective of its intellectual property, and this deal is likely to include strong protections for American copyrights and patents. That could be good news for American companies, but it could also lead to higher prices for consumers if it stifles competition. So, while the digital trade and intellectual property provisions might not be as attention-grabbing as tariff reductions, they're definitely worth paying attention to. Because in the digital age, the rules governing data and intellectual property are only going to become more important. Trade deals are rarely a one-way street. They involve give and take, concessions and compromises, and in this case it seems the UK has had to make some concessions, particularly when it comes to food and agriculture. Rumors are swirling about the UK potentially opening its doors to American agricultural products that don't exactly have the best reputation across the pond. We're talking about things like chlorine-washed chicken and hormone-treated beef, products that have been subject to stringent EU regulations that the UK, post-Brexit, is no longer bound by. Now the UK government insists it won't compromise on its food safety standards, but the pressure to strike a deal with the US could be immense, and it remains to be seen whether those standards will hold firm. On the flip side, the UK is hoping to gain easier access to the US market for its car industry, which has been hit hard by tariffs in recent years. A reduction in those tariffs could be a lifeline for British car manufacturers, but it could also lead to job losses in the US if American consumers flock to cheaper British imports. Section 5. Show me the money, economic impacts, and projections. Alright, let's talk numbers, shall we? Because at the end of the day, trade deals are all about the bottom line. Proponents of the deal are already touting its potential economic benefits, with projections suggesting it could boost the UK's GDP by 0.5% and the US's by 0.3% over the next 5 years. They're also promising thousands of new jobs in both countries, though they tend to be vague on the specifics of where those jobs will be and who will benefit from them. Of course, these are just projections, and as anyone who's ever played the stock market knows, projections are about as reliable as a weather forecast in a hurricane. The actual impact of the deal could be much higher or much lower, depending on a whole host of factors that are impossible to predict with any certainty. One immediate impact we have seen is a slight bump in the value of the British pound against the US dollar, suggesting that at least some investors are optimistic about the deal's prospects. But whether that optimism translates into tangible benefits for ordinary people remains to be seen. Unsurprisingly, the trade deal has been met with a mixed bag of reactions from politicians on both sides of the Atlantic. Trump, never one to miss an opportunity to toot his own horn, has hailed the deal as a great honor and a sign of the special relationship between the US and the UK. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, on the other hand, has taken a more cautious approach, emphasizing that his government will always prioritize the national interest. It's a delicate balancing act for Starmer, who needs to show he can secure favorable trade deals post-Brexit, while also addressing concerns about the potential downsides of closer ties with the US. Within both countries, the deal has its share of critics. In the UK, there are concerns about the impact on local industries and the potential erosion of regulatory standards. In the US, some lawmakers have expressed reservations about the long-term implications of the deal, particularly when it comes to digital trade and intellectual property rights. To fully understand the significance of this US-UK trade deal, we need to view it within the broader context of global trade. The deal comes at a time of heightened trade tensions between the US and China, with both sides locked in a tit-for-tat tariff war that has disrupted global supply chains and raised prices for consumers. Some analysts see the US-UK deal as a way for the US to strengthen its hand in negotiations with China by forging closer ties with key allies like the UK. Others view it as a sign that the US is increasingly turning inward, prioritizing bilateral deals with friendly nations over multilateral agreements that involve more compromises. The UK, for its part, is eager to secure new trade deals post-Brexit, and the US represents a significant potential market. But the UK also needs to balance its relationship with the US with its ties to the European Union, its largest trading partner. As with any complex issue, expert opinions on the US-UK trade deal are divided. Some economists praise the deal's comprehensiveness and its potential to boost economic growth. They argue that the tariff reductions will benefit consumers and businesses alike, while the provisions on digital trade and intellectual property will promote innovation and investment. Other experts are more cautious, warning that the deal's long-term impact is difficult to predict, and that some sectors of the economy, particularly in agriculture and manufacturing, could be negatively affected. They also raise concerns about the potential for regulatory divergence, with the UK potentially weakening its standards to align more closely with those of the US. Public opinion on the deal is also mixed, with polls showing a relatively even split between those who support it and those who oppose it. Many people are unsure about the potential benefits and drawbacks, highlighting the need for greater transparency and public education about the deal's provisions.